adjustments or a percentage or something like that? A little bit more like that? Okay, so we're going to cover both areas, so I think it'll just be a little bit of a good reminder for those of you that do have that little more experience. And I would actually love to hear from you, so those of you that are comfortable looking, maybe some best practices or tips that you have as well. The bottom line is, just like an application, you're looking for the report to be as complete as possible. And I think that that's one of the biggest pushbacks that we get from the industry, is that what the knowledge was and the information that the appraiser that completed the form had isn't always on the piece of paper. So it may not be that it's an inaccurate appraisal. It may not be that those are not the best comps that should have been selected. It's just that he didn't convince you of that. So I needed him to be a little bit more on the narrative side so that I was a little bit more comfortable with the documentation that he's given me. First thing that we want to say out loud is, when you're looking at the value that you've been given on the appraisal report form, is that scientific? Is that even really mathematic? So what is it? It's a subjective opinion. I love both your answers, ladies. It's exactly what it is. So if we, please don't do this, but it would be super fun if we sent out 3 appraisal orders to 3 different appraisers and didn't include the sales contract on the purchase, and see what they sent back. Would they send back 3 different opinions of value? And even if they did have some overlap with the comparables that they selected, would there be different adjustments to the comparables that they made to come up with the value that they gave you? Absolutely. So it is super, super hard, and it's becoming a little bit harder, in my opinion, to really review an appraisal. So I'm absolutely encouraging you to use the tools that Fannie Mae has, that Freddie Mac has. And they're giving us those, and they're trying to kind of say, all right, we don't want to put too much pressure, okay, I guess that's for a lack of a better word, on the appraiser. We want them to be able to really give us their opinion because they are the expert in the market. But this is what you should have looked at, or why didn't he or she use this or that, or why didn't you? So those tools that they have for you are awesome, okay? And I just went through a live session on Collateral Underwriter on Monday, and it's amazing what tools I didn't know existed within the system that I actually had an opportunity to kind of scroll through and look at and touch and whatever. So really, really kind of exciting things there. So the URAR, the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, also called the 1004, also called this Form 70. It is what it is. It needs to be complete. And then resources that you have available, the role of the appraiser, and then your role and how do you fit in and all this. And what I see is everywhere I go, the different lenders all have wildly different policies on what that person in that seat does with that review of that appraisal. Some have appraisal review departments. Some, they don't look at it at all. Some, it goes here. Some, they look at. It's just a very, very different experience everywhere I go. So we're just going to give you some best practices, but you're certainly going to apply whatever the policy and procedure is here. And then what we also have available, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about rural specifically or condo specifically, but certainly, as Christy said, if you have some questions about those areas, I know condo is one that we typically get a lot of. You know, just ask me those questions. That's fine, because we do training on all of these. So we have specifically a rural property, a manufactured home, and a condominium, as well as the addendum for the appraisal, which is the MC 1004. We have a appraisal checklist, and it doesn't mean that it's a hard stop at any point. It's just, if you really don't know what you're looking for, if you're just kind of saying, like, I'm taking in all of this data and I'm not even sure what to do with it, we give you some parameters around, hey, you know, if it's this or that, check that box. If it's this or this, check that box. And then at the end of the day, when you look at it and every box is checked, or a significant amount of boxes are checked, which would definitely represent red flags, maybe it needs to go to a different level of that review. So use some tools that you have internally for that as well. So just as far as an overview, the property, it provides the appraisal itself, what is going on with the physical property, meaning the lot, the plot. It also should give you an absolute, perfectly detailed description of what's sitting on that lot. You know, where does Fannie and Freddie want all the value or the majority of the value to be on the land, on the improvements, on the home, on the other structures like garages and other things? Where do they want the value to come in? On the home, okay, on the home. So if somebody makes this particular property so specific to their needs and their wants, does that take away from the future marketability of it if you were to ever take that property back? Absolutely, absolutely it does. So the only way we can really consider market value is by what are people buying in that area and what are they paying for it when they buy it. So I like to talk about 3 different price points, if you will. If you folks in here were financially looking at buying a $400,000 house, what is that going to give you in this area or wherever it is that you live? What is that going to give you? $400,000. Pretty nice house. Pretty nice house, like how big? Okay, so 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, 1 story, 2 story? Okay, garage or carport? Garage, okay. What kind of size parcel? I was going to say, oh, okay, so 0.2. All right, so maybe 150 by 200? That's probably a little bit bigger. Okay. A little bit smaller? Okay. You going to get granite or stone in there for 400? All right. How about tile or 1-unit tubs in the bathrooms? Tile? Both? A little bit of both? Okay. So when you go in with your budget of $400,000, you're expecting to have certain things in there. So you're not walking into a $400,000 house and saying, oh, I hope they have linoleum. You know what I mean? Like, I hope there's a whole bunch of pink formica in here. I mean, that's not what you're hoping for. So that's certainly not something that you'd pay more than the $400,000 for if they did have stone. Okay? So there's going to be an expectation there. How many of you bowl on a fairly regular basis? Like bowl, like, you know. How many of you have an initial on your shirt when you do it? Okay? So if there was a bowling lane in the rec room, kind of play area, man cave, if you will, would you pay extra money for if it had a bowling lane included? Okay? How many of you would? Would it be cool? Would it be like, you got to see this? We're never going to use it, but you got to see this, okay? So there is a cool, I like it, and it might be more marketable, but I'm really not going to take any more money out of my pocket for a bowling lane, right? And then there's a, oh my gosh, I have to have it. So give me any of your I have to have it's. What do you have to have? Okay, so if I'm looking in the $400,000 range, I want that 10-month, 11-month experience. I want a kitchen out there. You know, I want some outdoor living space. I want that, okay? So, all right, absolutely. Does anybody else have a, how many of you are on must have a theater room? Those were in and now they're kind of out again. Okay, must have a pool. All right. So there's, for this price, it better have it. Oh, it has this thing, I'm not going to pay any more money for it. And then there's this, oh my gosh, it has this thing, I'm willing to take money out of my pocket. So can that, what I'm taking money out of my pocket for, be different based on the geographic area and region it's in, that house? Could it even be a difference in the actual literal, what neighborhood it's in? Absolutely, absolutely. So when we finance cars, you go to Kelley Blue Book, right? And you say, this is how much an 8-cylinder, stick shift, leather, T-top, blah, 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 blah is worth, okay? And this is how much I'm going to lend on it. But if you say, I'm going to get a wall fireplace, wood burning in Phoenix, is that meaningful? How about wood burning stove in Buffalo, New York? A little bit more. How about pool here in this Fort Worth, Dallas area? Okay, so how about pool in Green Bay, Wisconsin? Now, does it cost pretty much the same amount to do a basic pool? I mean, you have the pool, the liner, you have to do the this, you have to have the fence around it, you have to have a... So also, it's about, are those people in that area willing to pay extra money for that item? based on how much use and marketability will it bring back to them on a resale. But it's really about their personal, do I want a pool or not? Now pools, I love it because they're so controversial. How many of you want a pool? I know the gentleman in the back does, but how many of you want a pool? How many of you are like, I wouldn't take a house with a pool. I don't want them, it's maintenance, it's safety, it's insurance, it's, right? So they're super, super controversial. So again, if I'm looking for my report to prove to you that pools are worth money, and then in this market area, people are willing to pay money for that pool, what do I have to show you comps with? Pools, right? So we're always looking at a paired sale relationship. So if I have this item, this thing, this whatever, that I say location that brings value, there should be support of that value based on the selections that the appraiser has given you. And it doesn't have to be, we have to have 3 sold and transferred comps. We absolutely have to. But can we have 4? How about 5? Absolutely 6, bring them on, okay? So it can certainly be one of the 4th or 5th or 6th comps, but that's fine. But again, we need that paired sale. Is it important that we have the appraiser's opinion and that they were qualified to go out and actually prepare this report? Have you ever heard a story that the appraiser showed up, they're not from the area, they're not familiar with it, they got this all wrong? Is that what every realtor says, then the appraisal doesn't come in? Okay? But does it happen in real life? It absolutely does. So show of hands, how many of you have ever read the 25 certifications that are attached to every single appraisal report? Be honest right now, we just took an ethics class. Yes or no? All right. All I'm asking you to do is read them once. Okay, so going forward, it doesn't have to be today, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but just one time I'm asking you to read through those. One of them is, I have experience and knowledge in this market area appraising this type of property. That's one of the certifications that that appraiser just made to you. So should it be have camera, will travel? Sure, I'll go there. I'm kind of close. You know what I mean? I'll drive up from Lubbock. How far can, Fort Worth be? Really far, okay? So that's one thing that they're promising you. They're also saying, I have friends and knowledge and access there, meaning I'm part of the multiple listing service. I have realtors. I know where the courthouse is, so I can look at and research public data. So they're saying all of that in one of the other certifications to you. So it should be a very educated opinion is my point, okay? And we know that that's not always true, but we hope it is. Again, giving us that detail and any potential issues that that property may have or bring forward. The market value is really the most probable price that somebody is willing to pay and could pick up a home in that area for, with that approximate amenity and size and things like that, without any craziness going on as far as related sales concessions or gifts or grants or anything like that. So the big question is, were both the buyer and the seller typically motivated? How many of you have ever heard the argument or maybe posed the argument that a foreclosure or a distressed sale should never be a comp? Have you heard that before? Now, I'm not asking what your opinion is, but you've heard that before, right? So really, besides just the appraisal report, when we talk about the addendum report that goes with it, the MC 1004, the market condition report, that's going to give you a little bit more insight to that, because if they tell you that there have been 13 transferred properties in this area, single family, and that 8 of them have been distressed sales, what does that tell you about that marketplace? It's a distressed marketplace. So could those comps then be very well comps? Absolutely. But if they tell you there's been 13 transfers of real estate and 2 of them are distressed sales, I'm going to use the other 11. I'm not going to go pick on these other 2. So if the homes are distressed and they are available on the market, that is the most probable price that somebody could have come in and did buy a house. Now, have any of you ever saw or have seen a property that literally went through the legal process of being foreclosed and then evicted, sheriff sale? I mean, the whole thing, not a short sale where we agree and I gently hand you the keys. I'm talking about get out, I have a badge and a gun, get off the property, okay? How was that property? What? Exactly. I mean, did they dust before they got evicted? Did they say, the sheriff's coming, we better clean up a little bit? No, they probably said, the sheriff's almost here, get the last of that copper piping and wiring from the wall. And then they left. So is that house typically ever going to be a comp? No, not the gutted, ridiculous house. Absolutely, positively not. So we're never talking about that. That would be an auction as is, you know what I mean? That's not going to be a comp. So I think that we kind of overblow that whole thing, so forget about that. Both parties are well-informed and well-advised. Is this always true? Well, we can hope for the best. But I mean, you never talk to the seller. I mean, you hopefully give your guidance, you know, and your kind of consulting whenever you have a conversation with that borrower, if you have a conversation with that borrower, but I mean, there's only so much that you can do. So we're just hoping that they were acting on their own, they were acting with some knowledge. Time is not a tick, tick, tick time. Time is that there weren't a lot of restrictions on the property sale, that it was to such a limited number of folks that it doesn't really qualify as being a comparable because it was not an open sale. So that's kind of what we're talking about there. And then US dollars. We don't see it too much now, but in 08, 09, when we just had, you know, just values crashing, we saw all kinds of bartering going on. I'll trade you my condo and some money for your house. You know, I'll give you 60 head of cattle, you know, and this. So we can only acknowledge the US dollar part. We can't acknowledge how much the condo was worth or how much your cows were worth. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So that was troublesome because then that was giving false, you know, docs on the books as far as what did it actually transfer for. So that was messing things up even more. And then how many of you have ever seen a concession, not a financing concession where they're going to pay the borrower's points, the buyer's points. They're going to pay for some of the prepaids. They're going to assist them in closing costs in general. Sure, we've all seen that. But how many of you have seen where they're going to give them something? A decorator package, I'm going to leave the car, I'm going to leave any of that crazy stuff? Yeah, yeah. So Fannie and Freddie used to be pretty lenient about that back in the day. They used to make sure that we had specifically the appraiser say that they only appraised the real estate. They did not include any of the personal items or the non-realty items. Now you don't get away with it that easy. They want whatever those items are valued and then subtracted from the sale price. Now, if it's a lawnmower, do you believe that the borrower was like on the fence with the two properties and was like, totally this one, we're getting that lawnmower? You know what I mean? So it has to be something that they really believe was a consideration on making the selection for the subject property. So just watch that. Good news is and bad news is. We're now in what kind of a market, buyer or seller? Seller. So what do we have less of? Okay, we have less inventory, less crazy concessions. Okay, so that's good news and bad news. So you don't have to review the contracts and kind of deal with those crazy things. But now you have a limited inventory. We now are having bidding wars in some areas. Now the properties are selling for more than the list price, and then what's your value? Well, if you were willing to sell it for $150 and then it got a bidding war to $180, is it worth $150 or $180? Exactly.
So when you have permanently fixed values like home theaters,
Yep.
that are actually built into the property, those aren't necessarily your non-realty items.
No, those are included at that point.
But if there is a non-realty item, then like a projection to go, it's not necessarily permanent. If they give that to them and they say value is zero and it's written, is that sufficient?
It's sufficient as long as you buy it. Like they can't say the Waterford chandelier and the imported Oriental rugs have zero value. Like. Right, you know what I mean? So if there's the projector that goes with the in-home screening, you know, who else is going to have a value for that? You know what I mean? It's so specific to that system. It's, you know what I mean? Could you sell it on eBay? Maybe. But, you know what I mean? So just that's a common sense thing. So, I mean, I think if you use your judgment, you'll be on the right path.
And to your other point a minute ago, so let's say we have a seller or a buyer, who made an offer on a home. A buyer who made an offer on a home for, say, $20,000 over whatever the list price was, and the appraisal comes in low. But they have 7 other contracts that were submitted on that house also overvalued. Is that something that can be provided to help with value?
Excellent point. Did you just read Fannie Mae's latest announcement?
I did not, but
Okay.
it sounds like I'm onto something.
Yes. No, because I thought that was like, hey, where are you going with this? So we absolutely, to use the value that we have to have closed sales. But certainly to prove that the market is moving in one direction, you can absolutely get the contracts. You can absolutely show, and especially in new construction, that's super helpful because they usually close in phases. You know what I mean? So they might be pending 50 sales, and then you're going to have 50 comps, but right now you don't have very many at all. So absolutely they are looking at that. So people were always like, Fannie Mae does not allow any type of a time adjustment. They don't allow this, they don't allow that. That's not necessarily true. Okay, that's not true. You just have to make sure that it's justified, you can prove it, and certainly contracts help you do that. Absolutely, absolutely. So again, just watch your concessions, that's all. What is your responsibility? Well, everything. Okay, so do I have any loan officers that stayed for this? Okay, awesome. So from a loan officer perspective, you turned in a file, I'm your underwriter. It is on paper, because of the appraisal I have, a 50 LTV, no cash out refinance, and the borrower has an 830 credit score. The ratios are 32-40. I just suspended your loan because I have a call in to the AMC, the Appraisal Management Company, to get some clarification on some of the comps. How many of you are screaming right now? Okay, what are you saying? Come on, be honest. Have you lost your mind? I have an 840 credit score. We have a 50 LTV. Like, we have ratios that are 40s. Like, what? Okay, what? So here's the issue. The standalone appraisal report by itself, standalone, has to be absolutely 100% acceptable to the agencies without any consideration of the borrower's credit package. So if this is am I allowed to say, because I'm being recorded, crappy, okay? If this is a crappy appraisal and I have an awesome credit package and I've now put my crappy appraisal into my awesome credit package, what does it make the file? Crappy, okay? Okay, it makes it crappy. So Freddie Mac specifically has been very forceful in their verbiage, in their seller guide, saying stand alone, 100% consideration uniquely. So this does not help this get any better, okay? This has to be good all by itself. And by the way, if it's a crappy appraisal, you really don't have a 50 LTV. In fact, I don't even know what LTV it is because I don't know what this is, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so I needed to put that loan in suspense, even though you think I'm crazy. So please bear with your underwriters. They're trying to protect your company, okay? I get you're trying to do loans. You're trying to have customer satisfaction ratings for all of your customers. Totally get that, but we need to do what's right. Okay, we need to make sure that that's not going to come back and haunt us later. So I do need that clarification, even, if you will. And by the way, what does everybody that's refinancing think their home is worth? A lot more than it is, okay? And I love it when they actually did some upgrades to it and they did them themselves. What do they think their house is worth then? Even more. And you're like, I did the work myself. You're like, I noticed, okay? I noticed that. So unfortunately, you are responsible. So the minute you take this appraisal report into the file, you are now 100% responsible for it. So you either believe everything in it or you don't. So just as an idea, you have to make sure that it's complete, that to the best of your ability it meets USPAP, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It meets the requirements for your lender, for your investor, so Fannie or Freddie or whoever, you know what I mean? FHA, if you will. It wouldn't be this particular appraisal report, but it would still be an appraisal report. So no matter what, it's all on the lender. And that necessarily isn't all that fair, but it is what it is. So they have an absolute special, section of their selling guide to deal with all this. General requirements, what I need. By the way, I have knowledge and experience in appraising this type of property in this market area. I didn't make that up. It's number 11. And number 12 is I have access to the information to make my judgment of value and give you my opinion of value. So those are both in there as well. USPAP standards, okay? Every appraiser that you have, that you hire to bring on and accept an assignment is going to follow USPAP guidelines. So you don't necessarily know all of USPAP guidelines, but again, you want to use some common sense to just kind of guide you if you believe that that's there. Disclosure information to the appraiser. We're supposed to give them a little bit more than the contract. How many of you, show of hands, don't even think we should give them the contract? I mean, I think it would be, as I said before, way more interesting, and why already put blinders on them? Because if somebody goes in knowing that the sale price is 200, are they going to go in and select comps that they believe are in that 200 range? So I do believe it puts a little bit of a blinder on them and doesn't lead them necessarily to the most accurate one. But does the contract show other terms of that sale that the appraiser might need to know, and it could actually have an impact on their opinion? Yes, like financing and sales concessions, you know, all of that. So we absolutely do need to know that. Now, the contract, we want to make sure that they're currently working under the most recent contract with any disclosures, with any contract changes, especially new construction that could change things dramatically. So we do want to look at that. Again, appraiser responsibility to look at all of it. Measure the days. We did a kind of a round table, kind of town hall meeting, and we had lenders in the room, appraisers in the room, and realtors in the room. Were we brave? Yes, we were, okay? And I was the facilitator of that mess, okay? And there was a little bit of fighting and bickering, but I still think it was good to have everybody on the same page. The realtors were actually saying out loud things like, well, if I don't want it to look like a really stale and old, you know, listing, I just have them withdraw it and then I relist it so it only looks like it's been on the market 10 days. So should the appraiser fall for that? Is the appraiser supposed to look past the 9 days and see, was it previously listed before this current listing? Yeah, so it was just kind of amazing to me what they were saying out loud. One of the appraisers said, we never check rural because we know our lenders don't like that and they'll be upset, so we just check suburban, even though it's in a rural area. Like, what? Like, what made you think that would make the lender upset? I'm going to be more upset if you tell me it's suburban and then you give me a comp that's 10 miles away. If you give me a rural location and you give me a comp 10 miles away, I know why, because it's rural. So just some of the things that they were saying, like these little myths or urban legends that they've picked up along the way, super, super enlightening that we got all of these different opinions here. So they need to deal with all that. They need to deal with those concessions. They need to know previous listing and days on market and put that in all of that. And then you need to make sure everything is there. It's like reviewing a tax return with no schedules. You know what I mean? I need the full story. I need all the schedules and worksheets. Same thing with an appraisal. I need the photos. I need the map. I need the, so pushing back because I need that to tell a story. So any inconsistent data definitely needs to be addressed. Absolutely. Pictures, front, rear, street, kitchen, bathrooms, main living area, and outbuildings. And what do I never want to see a picture of in the appraisal report? People. Okay, people. It's a fair lending potential issue for you, you know what I mean, that you just don't even want to go anywhere near. And plus it's weird, okay? It's just odd. I mean, we had one I've seen recently. There was a couple, well, I don't know, there was 2 people in bed on the appraisal report. I'm like, number one, why are they in bed when the appraiser's in their room, okay? And number two, why did you take a picture of them in bed? And 3, why'd you send it to me? Like, was that helpful at all? Okay, no, just weird. So we don't want any people, or if they are people, we want to kind of, you know, phase them out, kind of screen them out. So can they have a dog? Can they have a cat? I mean, they're not protected classes as of yet anyway, so I'm fine with that. But then that leads me to something else. We got an appraisal in. There were farm animals everywhere in the photos. I mean, everywhere. So our underwriter pushed back and said, like, what's up with the farm animals? Because guess what there was no mention of? A barn, a paddock, a shed. Like, where are you putting them? Like, where are they sleeping? Where are they eating? Like, are they living in the living room? Like, what is going on here? So The lender came back and said, no worries, we contacted the applicant because it was a refi, and those are all personal pets. I don't care if you name your goat, okay? But I need to know where the goat is, okay? Where are they living? Where are they? Because do outbuildings matter? Yeah, we talked about it before. They may or may not represent any value. We need the majority of the value to come in that house that you said, the actual physical property, the residence. But if I have so many outbuildings, or as I mentioned before, if it's so specific to ranching, to farming, does that take away from the marketability of it? Absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. So full picture, absolutely. We need the sketch, any additional photos of something that you need me to see. So if they have mentioned in the appraisal report that this property has gone through extensive renovations, they're then giving us a condition. They're giving us the actual age of the property. So they're saying this 100-year-old house is just like living in a 10-year-old house. So what do I know about that property? What's been updated? Everything. I mean, literally everything. Plumbing, wiring, HVAC, everything. So they are supposed to give us kind of a storyboard of photos of everything, like proof that it's been updated. Throw us a little bit more of that. And that would be your extra photographs. We do need a comp picture as well. Now, the comp picture can come from multiple listing, but were they at least supposed to drive by it? Yes, they were. How many of you have ever rented something, maybe a hotel room or something, online? How many of you have ever dated online? Okay. Is that always what you get at the end of the day? Was that the hotel room, or was that the gal or the guy that showed up? Probably not, okay? So we absolutely need that, and they should make sure that that's really what it still looks like. And then, of course, where is it compared to the other comparables as well? So are you supposed to literally read all of this? Say yes right now. Yeah, okay. So how many people just go, yep, that's the address, check out my taxes because that's part of the DTI, make sure there's no HOA, see what the date is and the value, and then go to the pictures, and if the pictures are really cool, I'm going to pass them around. Nobody in here? Shh, it'll be our secret. That's okay. So absolutely. So do you actually have to look at all this? Absolutely. And some of the things that you'd think, like, why am I even looking at that? Well, clearly we're going to look at the property address and your borrower. That gives us a huge idea of who is actually really refinancing, or it could be one of those straw buyers that we talked about earlier. The address should be USPS. It should be their mailing address where we can actually validate it, go look at, see, enter your zip code, go and get your address and make sure that it's actually there. So we can actually verify and validate that particular information being accurate, and you'd have that right there. You'd have the county. The borrower, as we mentioned, this gives us a big insight in some cases where maybe they didn't qualify by themselves and then they added a borrower. So how was that initial appraisal actually performed? Under what name was it? We want to make sure that the owner of record is really the seller, or the owner of record is really the person that's trying to refinance. It's a little awkward when you're trying to refinance something that you don't currently own. So of course they should check for that as well. The legal description and the assessor's actual parcel number, that can be absolutely telling, especially in my story before where there might be a multiple lot. What is the legal description so we can make sure that it's there? One of the big common things that happened, especially if you're serving rural areas, the most likely parcel size is about 5 acres. This particular parcel size is 25 acres, but really only about 5 or 10 of it is usable. The rest is kind of marsh or, protected area. Is it okay if the appraiser goes in and identifies the parcel being 25 acres, but only then appraises a smaller, much more typical parcel size of that 5 to 10 acres? Is that okay? It's not. So for Fannie and Freddie, that is absolutely a practice that they will not allow. Now, if they literally legally separate it to this is going to be my lot over here and this is going to be my parcel with the property and the residence on it, then that's fine, and then you would secure this particular one. But that is something that caused a little bit of an issue because for USPAP, that was acceptable, but for Fannie and Freddie, it wasn't acceptable. So you were getting some appraisal reports that came through with that practice, and it is not okay. So you do want to look for things like that as well. So just make sure that you're really mortgaging the right parcel. Obviously, that's important. Owner, tenant, or vacant. We had one that came back. It was a refinance of a vacation home, but it was completely vacant. What's your question? It's a refi. Aren't you asking, where's your stuff? I mean, come on, like how am I buying that this is really an owner-occupied vacation property rather than it's right now not being rented and you're using it for rental purposes? Does that make a big difference for our rules? Of course it does. So we pushed back on it and said, it's a refi of a second home, but it's vacant. And they gave us back a letter, and it was from the borrower, and the borrower said, every time I go there, I bring my stuff with me. I mean, if you're gonna lie better than that. I mean, like, I just had the floors redone, you know what I mean? So everything was in the garage. I mean, tell me something. But yeah, so are you gonna buy that? No, that doesn't even make sense. So that does matter, absolutely. When we look at special assessments, I live in New Jersey right now. New Jersey was hit now 6 years ago with the Hurricane Sandy. So right along the beach and waterfront area, we had a lot of condos, as you can imagine, a lot of vacation homes, so right now they were not all properly insured, especially as second homes. You don't get the $250,000 flood insurance on a second home. It just doesn't come with it. It's not part of the flood policy. So a lot of the associations obviously took on the responsibility for that. And then what does that do for their budget? It drains it, absolutely. So does that association then now put on a special assessment to every unit to get back into a manageable budget to maintain that entire property and project? They do. So there's one that's actually really close to me that the units went all the way down and they were selling for maybe $100,000, which is unheard of in New Jersey, number one, and by the water, number two. But there was a $200,000 assessment on each unit. Are you gonna finance that for somebody? No. So how many people are gonna come for a loan for the 100 and pay up the $200,000? That's crazy. So now that particular project is defunct, okay? They don't have a manageable budget. Everything has kind of gone wrong throughout that. But again, they were just really underinsured, did not have enough reserves, did not have the proper insurances, all of that, led to that. Now, I'm not saying that you're gonna ever run into anything that significant, but could you have a special assessment on it? So that could actually impact marketability and affordability for your borrower. So you do wanna note that and acknowledge that. How many times have you ever been surprised that what you thought was a detached single-family property came back on the title work with a master deed and a required association that you had no idea about through the appraisal even? So we absolutely need them to identify whether it's certainly a condo, it should be on a separate form, a different form, or it should be as a planned unit development. So really that definition is a mandatory association where we're paying that for some common area. Super common, yeah. And again, you don't want to find out about it at the last minute. You know what I mean? And it can be really insignificant, but we still need to make sure that we're coding it properly, we're getting the documentation prepared. And then of course, what is the transaction? Is it a purchase? Is it a refinance of a vacant second home? Like what are we actually talking about here? The client, who actually was it prepared for? And then what's been happening? So if they've been continuously trying to market this property, does that give you any kind of a red flag? Now, it could be that they were just completely unrealistic about their initial ask price and now they've come down into line and it's now finally sold, but it's absolutely a red flag. Is there something about this property where it was really not that marketable? It took 364 days to find somebody that was willing to buy it. So it's not a hard stop, certainly, but you do want to go, why was it on the market so long? So looking at that history of what happened, why was it on the market, what was going on there, can absolutely be really, really helpful. Should the appraiser have reviewed the sales contract that you sent them? Of course they should. So that should absolutely be checked. I did. And then the terms within that sales contract that should be and could be relevant to this particular transaction should absolutely, absolutely be there. So the overview of the contract, the review of the contract, and what information should have been disclosed to the appraiser, all of it, not just some of it. So what was their initial and then final opinion? What is going on as far as concessions, and did I include them in there? When we get here, this is just a grid checklist. I mean, clearly I'm not going to read everything to you, but where is it? What's going on? Stable, imbalance, and then housing. So based on what type of an appraisal report it is, it's going to be very specific for that. So this is going to be a single-family residential market area. On a condo, these are going to be what are condos going for and what are their ranges of sale prices. So it's very specific to what type of an appraisal it is. Now, if you look and say the low is 195, the high is 300, and the predominant value is 215, and then your property appraises for 302. Are you worried? It's above the high and really very far above the predominant. So do you have to be super convinced that that property is really worth 302? I mean, it's just going to give you an idea to take a much closer look at the comps. If they went and got 3 comps from out of town to justify 302, then what have they just proven to you? That the next town is worth 302, but what is this town not worth? 302, okay? So again, it just gives you a little insight to how did they approach their sales? You know what I mean? What did they do? Where did they go? So absolutely look at that. Now here, 100% is a 1 unit. Now what if it said 95 and then 5% are 2 to 4 families? Is that going to be a little difficult then to find a closed sale that's a 2 or 4 or 3 unit if only 5% of the market is that multifamily style? So then that gives you a reason for why they're a little bit older, why they went a little further away. And it makes more sense once it becomes a multi-use property, a multi-unit property. It's a lot about the cash flow, not just the desirability of a single family home to live in. So it makes a little bit more sense when we can go a little bit further away if we need to for that income generation. Neighborhood boundaries. If you looked at the map that they gave you and you had a highlighter, should you be able to read that section and actually make a very delineated geographic area of what they're calling the neighborhood? Yeah, it should literally be like Route 9 over to 440, across to blah, 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 over to, and then where should all your stickers be that say subject property, comp 1, comp 2, comp 3? In there, okay? Now, the only reason they wouldn't be in there is if on the next paragraph where it says neighborhood description, they told you about the happenings and what was going on in this neighborhood, and then this is where they would say, and competing areas for this neighborhood include blah, 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 blah. And then when you go to the map, that's what they were talking about. And that's why they used a comp from over there instead of here and instead of here. So absolutely super telling, but a lot of times I read them and I'll think boilerplate. What does that mean? If I said, know where this neighborhood is, it's close to places of worship, shopping, and highways. Where could that property be? Anywhere. So that's ridiculous, okay? So it should be very specific to what this neighborhood is really about, okay? Where it is, what are the influences within that neighborhood. So absolutely neighborhood boundaries and neighborhood description. And then this is generic, these market conditions. This is about unemployment in that area. It's about, is there really an opportunity for jobs and job starts? It's for interest rates. What type of financing is available so that you can buy a home? Because the availability of credit, does that impact prices of homes? Absolutely it does. Absolutely. Credit gets really tight, values go down. Credit gets really open, values go up. Absolutely has something to do with it. So we definitely need all of that. And a lot of times it says, see addendum. Is that helpful when it says see addendum? And then you read it and it says something other than close to place of worship, right? So absolutely we want to look at all those things. So spend some time on there. It will absolutely be helpful for you. When we look at this next one, my computer locked up, so all right. So kind of walked you through my little bullet points here of what you're doing and what you're seeing and things like that. I don't know why it locked up, but it did. All right. How big is the lot? What is the square footage? Unless it's an acre or more, we need it in the square footage. Once it goes over an acre, we're going to say 1.2 or 2.5 or whatever that is. What's the shape of it? Is there any view? Do views cost money? What's the most expensive view, typically? Water. Okay. People will pay for like a puddle. You know, you're like, that's only there when it rains. That's okay. It's awesome. You know what I mean? So they just kind of get that. The highest and best use and legally permissible, financially feasible, and maximally productive. So I think you've all thought of the terms highest and best use. I mean, it's just kind of a phrase. But I don't know that you've actually thought it through as far as, is it legal? Is it physically possible to be used as what they're trying to use it for? And then financially feasible, maximally productive. So you have what used to be a working dairy farm. Somebody from New York wants to move to Texas and pretend to be a Texan. Okay? And they're buying a farm to prove it. Now, they're not going to operate the farm. The farm is just going to sit there in the background. Okay? There's got a couple silos over here. I got that big barn. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm going to look at it. Okay? If you are convinced that this borrower is really not going to have any commercial type of activity, any type of farming or dairy or any agricultural activity, is that really maximally productive for that property to be looked at by a former New Yorker? That's crazy talk, right? That doesn't even make any sense. So just make sure you kind of think it all the way through when you're kind of judging, is that really the highest and best use for that particular property? Zoning. Would Fannie Mae ever buy a loan where the underlying collateral was zoned illegal? There actually is. There is. I mean, as much as a ridiculous question as that sounded, there actually is some time where they would buy that. So, I mean, very rare, so like don't get excited about that. But we are hoping, of course, that it is legally permissible to be used for whatever they're actually using it for. When it says that it's been grandfathered in, okay, what does that mean? Yeah. She's not going on record for that.
Well, when my very first one that I saw, it explained to me that I don't remember what it was, but basically it was an old home, and at that time that it was built, I guess that was
Okay then.
exactly
Right.
grandfather.
Yes. So if somebody wanted to replicate that exact scenario right now, they would be told no by the zoning department. But because when they did build that home in that setting, on that lot size, whatever it was, that was permissible at the time. So if it's checked that it's currently legal because it has been grandfathered in, what's important for us to know? That's your collateral. What if something happens to it? Can it be rebuilt? Okay, can it be rebuilt as is so that they can continue to use it as their purpose for using it? So that is important. We do want that statement absolutely in here. When we look at the utilities, does it matter if it's city water or whether it is a septic and a well? Could that impact marketability? Could that impact the value? Absolutely. Okay, absolutely. So from the first page to the second page, if you tell me that it's totally customary and probable and wonderful and great that everybody has, septic and wells, and then your 3 comps have city water and city sewer, that doesn't make any sense to me. Okay? So your comps better tell the same story that these did. So I kind of look at this as your inventory sheet, to make sure that the story they keep on this page is the same story they give you when they give you live examples of other homes that are similar. So really just making sure and holding them to what they're saying. Flood rules, you're going to use your flood cert. I mean, yes, we want this to be accurate, but again, you're not going to go with that. Is there anything environmental, encroachments, conditions, land uses that are going to be a trouble or troublesome for this particular property? So in Pennsylvania, we've seen it where there's been big plots of properties, a gigantic parcel, that as the children become adults and they then start their own families, they want them close to home. So they'll literally make and create separate legal parcels within what used to be like the whole homestead. Does that make sense? The problem was in this one area of Pennsylvania where that was super common, to gain access to those other sections and those other sites, there was a required easement in some cases. In some cases, there was a wooden bridge, like literally a little wooden thing that you would go over to cover a stream or something like that. We need to make sure that that particular property now can be accessed by the fire department, by emergency vehicle, by the police department, that type of thing. So that can absolutely happen here. So you do want to pay special attention to an easement or an access way or something like that, private road, all of those things. And then just again, what is your overall comment on what's going on there? This is telling you what is happening in that property. What is the siding? What are the windows? What's the style? How many stories? All of that. And then you're getting a visual in your mind of what this property looks like. So should you be shocked when you see the pictures, or should you be like, yeah, that's kind of what I pictured in my head? So there should be no surprises here. This is kind of setting you up of what's going on. When people do have additional features, like this is a patio and a fireplace, do those typically in your mind, do you think, get value? What do you think? Fireplace? Patio? All right. But whenever somebody tells you about what they did to the property, they added this or they added that, does that always equal value? Definitely not dollar for dollar. So they think, I put up a garage and it cost me $30,000. So then how much do you think that they think that improved the value of their property by? Or more, right? Or more. All right, so it's not about the cost of actually building it or creating it. It's, again, how much somebody in that neighborhood is willing to pay out of their pocket, okay, which is your pocket, by the way, because they're financing it, for that garage. So it's the contributory value, not the cost of the item. So it's all based on taste, based on what they're willing to pay for. So I love it when people do stuff to their house. C4, no updates in the past 15 years. The subject is in average overall condition, nothing really needed as far as major deferred maintenance or anything like that that would actually impact negatively the value of that property. Hot water tank was reportedly replaced, some minor areas of soiled carpet and dated decor, and then estimate cost to cure is about $1,500. Anything you'd make subject to because of carpet stains or anything like that? No. Now, one that we recently got in, it was a picture of a ceiling. And how many of you have ever had water damage in a property? You know how when it's coming in from the ceiling and it creates like a big bubble and you're just waiting for it to burst and splash all over something underneath it? This was one of those. It was a big, gigantic bubble. And you knew that it had been sitting water at some point or was currently. So the appraiser made a comment about it, wrote it up in the report, and then said, cost to cure, spackle and paint. What point did they miss?
The roof.
Why is there a big bubble of water on the ceiling? Like, missed that part completely. Was like, just hide it. Get that Zinner, whatever that paint is, covers everything. Just poke it, blow dry it, and paint it before the next person shows up to buy it. What? Like, why was it leaking? So completely missed the point of why do we care? So read into things, see if it makes sense to you, and then make sure that the pictures make sense. So what is it? Kind of what is it sitting on? Was there any dampness, settlement, and what's the house about? That's all. All right? Recent updates. So January 31st of 2015, when we look and see kind of what was happening, clarified existing policy that allows unlicensed and uncertified appraisers or an appraiser trainee to complete the property inspection. When the unlicensed or uncertified appraiser or appraiser trainee completes the property inspection, the supervisor appraiser is not required to also inspect, just to review the report themselves. So they wanted to clarify that. And then currently, at least one closed comp from the subject subdivision or the project, and one sale from outside the subdivision or project. With this update, we'll now accept 2 pending sales in lieu of 1 closed sale in the subjects, either the subdivision or in the projects, because they're just not available yet. So that's what I was referring to as far as, can I use things that are just pending versus that? So they just did some clarification on that. So I thought you were just checking on me to see if I knew that or not.
So an appraiser trainee can go out and inspect the property without being licensed, and the actual appraiser did not have to.
That's what they just clarified. Yep. Now, what they're also doing, which I don't know, you can tell me if this is good news or bad news. Right now, to be an appraiser, you need about 2 years worth of experience. It's a certain amount of hours of appraisal work you need to do under a supervisory, appraiser, licensed appraiser. And you need an associate's degree. So they're trying to lower the criteria to become an appraiser. Good or bad? Okay. Does an associate's degree in some unrelated field make you be a better appraiser? No. Okay. So I'm not saying that it's not good that you're a college graduate. I'm not saying anything like that at all. But they are re-looking at it because what's it super hard to get right now? An appraiser. So right now they talk all the time about how old mortgage bankers are and that the median age of a licensed mortgage banker or a mortgage banker is 55 years old. Okay? The median age of an appraiser is 57. So the appraisers are actually older than the bankers. And what is the average or median age of an FHA appraiser? 100. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, delete that from the recording. But yeah, so we do need some new people. Because if you're going to pay somebody on your books for 2 years that you have to supervise them and sign off on everything that they did while they're training, what are they likely to do the minute they actually get their own license? Leave and get a better opportunity. So it's so hard to get somebody and put that much time and effort into training them when they can just leave on you. So they are trying to get around and kind of work with the guidance on that. So it's the Appraisal Institute that's working on that right now. So again, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it is what it is. We talked about this already. 3 comps are typically what is absolutely required. How far away can you go for a comp in a suburban area? There is no written guideline in Fannie or Freddie Seller Guide for that. How about rural? No written guideline. How about urban, city? No written guideline. The only reference that you'll see to distance on urban is if it's in a urban setting that's going and undergoing regentrification. They say that in that case, it might be limited to almost like a block in some points. You know what I mean? That it can have that much difference in value. But that's really the only distance that they say. How old can a comp be? Okay. Everybody used to say 6 months. Okay. So now they're saying we'd like it to be within 12 months. But I mean, if you have a really good reason of why you picked one from 14 months or 15 months, is that going to be a dead stop, like no more saleability? I mean, so they want you to be told the story. Go with what it is, see what's going on there, but it does absolutely have to make sense for that particular market. And then the other reason is, if there's no sales within the last year, what in the world's going on? Like, what's happening in there? So some parts of the country that are about energy and things like right now, are they struggling right now with some jobs and some issues? So could there be a huge lack of sales over the most recent years in those areas where people are being laid off, they are losing their jobs, so again, it could be a telltale sign for something bigger that's happening that absolutely has something to do with value and will continue to have something to do with value. So we do want to know the whole story. And again, so are you picking up any kind of issues here, like what's going on there? So that's always meaningful.
What does it mean when an appraisal is whack?
Okay, perfect. If you have a subject property that is 1,500 square feet, what would you like your comp to be? 1,500 square feet, but is that always possible? I have to find them close, I have to find them similar, I have to find them within the same subdivision or development, and they're not 1,500. So what do I want you to use then? Higher and lower, okay? So don't just all go get me 2,200 square feet homes then, that doesn't make any sense. But if you can show me 1,500 square feet is definitely part of the market. I'm also showing you some 1,200 square feet. I'm also showing you some 1,800 square feet. I'm showing you kind of what the ranges are between a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller because I can't find just right. But don't get me wrong, just right is better. You know what I mean? So, but when you can't find just right, then show me both sides. Show me older, show me newer, show me bigger, show me smaller, show me newer, show me older. So it's bracketing all over.
I don't know if you mentioned effective age earlier or not, but so we have in our area, we have a lot of homes that are over, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yep.
That are completely gutted and renovated.
Yep.
How would you look at effective age on that? Is it based on the year built or based on the
Nope.
year it was redone?
And we did talk a little bit about it, but just I said it really briefly. So you're going to look at the actual age. And then my example was a 100-year-old home being effective 10. And you guys said, well, they redid everything then. The only problem is if you redo a 100-year-old house, and I mean you literally gut it and just really rip it down and do everything, does it have the same market appeal, better, worse, than something that was just built 2 years ago?
Depends on your buyer.
And it depends on the market. So to me, I would probably fall in love with something that was built 100 years ago. You know what I mean? It might have a true 2x4. You know what I mean? It might be built with 2x6s. It might be, so I'm thinking the construction was better back then. You know what I mean? It was solid, or it was this. It has different details that you don't really pick up and see now. It has some plaster instead of some sheetrock. You know what I mean? So what they didn't have to remove to redo all the wiring. But if you have a home that was built 40 years ago and was now same thing, like ripped down to the studs almost and then redone, does that 40-year-old house have the same appeal that a 2-year-old house does? I mean, what does it look like? I mean, you have to go with the pictures at that point. Does it have the desirability and the curb appeal? And I hate to say that because it's such a realtor saying, but I mean, does it have the curb appeal? I mean, how many of you have seen a bi-level home that was completely gutted and updated? But what is it still at the end of the day? It's still a bi-level. So does that really compare to your colonial or your ranch or your whatever you like here in Texas? You know what I mean? So it's about the style, okay, just as much as it about the effective age. Okay, absolutely. So shortage of comps, we just basically talked about this. Why? So if I tell you on the very front page that the marketing time is 3 to 6 months, what am I telling you? That a reasonably priced home that goes on the market is going to sell and close within, and that's what you're telling me is happening right now. So how old should my comps be? Right, I mean, it's supposed to make sense to the first page. So if all of a sudden now all your comps are a year old, but you're telling me everything sells here within 3 to 6 months once it goes on the market, why didn't you find one of those? And what would be a good reason why they didn't use one of those? It doesn't justify the value, right? Well, I had to pick these other ones. They were older and further away, but I got you your 200 that you asked me for. I didn't ask you for 200. I asked for your opinion of value, and the sales contract just acknowledges that this buyer wants to pay 200 for this house. That's all I told you. But I think they feel like we want them to say 200, okay? They are being asked to push that value. And again, maybe that was true more so years ago than it was not. But now with appraisal independence rule, mean, we can't even have that conversation about bring it in higher or don't bring it in or don't do this or do that. We can't talk to them, okay, if you're anywhere within the production area. So I think that definitely has changed a little bit as well. So deal with the shortage of the comps and why there could be a shortage of comps. There is still some unacceptable comparison selections that happen. I told you before in the earlier session my story about the crazy person that asked me to go to the stationery store. I ended up, I'm going to fast forward on the story. I ended up applying with a lender that was Freddie Mac. So they just used my front lot without a garage. But do you think a garage in a lake kind of area is meaningful? It's a 2-car garage. It's got a work area. I have additional, there's no residential activity on it, but it is that garage. There's off-site parking then. So I said, if I can find a lender that does Fannie Mae that will do these 2 lots, I have it made. I only missed value by about $6,000. So if I can pick up $6,000 with my extra lot and a 2-car garage, I got this LTV thing, so I'm good. So I found another lender, painful experience, by the way, went through, got the second appraisal. Now, not the second appraisal from the same lender. I got a new appraisal with a new lender. They did use both my lots. And how much did it come in for? $20,000 less than the appraisal that just used the front lot. Was I horrified? Yes. Was I shocked? I was like, well, I threw another lot in and it came down $20,000. Like, how is that even possible? So as a consumer, did I appeal the value on that? And what did the lender say to me? That was their opinion. And because of AIR, which I mentioned before, the appraisal independence rule, you as a lender can't just be like, oh, I don't like this one, let's get a new one, see if that's anywhere even closer to what she wants. Because what couldn't they find on it? Anything materially wrong with it. I mean, just because they didn't necessarily agree with the appraiser or it was a very different opinion than what a previous appraiser said, there was nothing really technically flawed about it. They used different comps. They used one comp that was on the same street that the other appraiser used, but was much smaller and sold for much less. Well, if they were on that street looking around, why didn't they pick the other one? There was probably a $15,000 difference between just those 2. But again, they said, my hands are tied. I can't do anything about it because there's nothing flawed about this. It's not a use PAP violation. They didn't go too far away or to this or to that. They didn't, so I can't do it. So did I go for 3 times the charm? No, I threw my hands up and said, I'll continue to pay 5.5 on my 30-year loan. I just couldn't do it. So again, opinions, wildly different. The choice of comps, wildly different. Were they all basically physically similar? Kinda. I mean, they're all cottages in Michigan on a lake. You know what I mean? They were all a little bit the same. You know what I mean? They were all on a lake. Different lakes, but same basic abilities on the lake, meaning the lake was a certain size. It was an all-sports lake, so you could have a boat, you could do this. So again, what's the difference? Not much. So yeah, but super frustrating? Absolutely. So is it really something that was unacceptable? No, not at all. Unacceptable to me, but I'm a whiny consumer, right? So I went home and didn't get my refinance, but that was about it. So requirements, again, it either has to be in the same marketplace or a competing market area, just like those other comps in my appraisal were. Okay, they just picked, in my opinion, the wrong ones. When you look at the map, would we love our property to be the center of attention? Is it always? No. Now, if they're going all west or all north or all south or all, is that a big red flag? Yes, because that south concentrated area might be a value of a certain amount, but mine's not there, mine's over here, it's north. So why'd you go all south and also go east? You know what I mean? That doesn't make any sense. So we want to make sure, just like bracketing, bigger, smaller, higher, older, all those, we want to make sure that kind of the selection of comps geographically represents really a representation of that neighborhood. And that's why that initial narrative description is so critical, that you then pay attention to that when you go out and look here. If you can see very specifically a county change or a natural boundary that's been crossed, you may want to consider, like, did he make mention of that? Was there any consideration from that? Does that literally take me to a different area? So all those things are something that you should consider. We talked about how close it should be. It has to make sense to the appraiser. So what are some of the things from a distance perspective that could change because I went so far away that would be important as an amenity, not from a house perspective, but as a neighborhood, I'm living there perspective? What can change if I go too far away? How about tax rolls and rates? Can that change if I go into a different county or a different town? How about schools? Number one, how about schools? So again, what about public services? Do I have garbage pickup at my little cottage, that I have in Michigan, in northern Michigan? No, you have a dump card, okay, that you then take your own stuff to the dump. Do we have a police department? Nope. Do we have a fire department? Volunteer, okay? So what do I get as an amenity for living in this space? So you want to look at all those things, and as we change into a different county or into a different, all of that changes, and that absolutely changes potential value and also marketability, which kind of go hand in hand. So you want to look at that as well. Comps in your projects or your subdivisions, we talked about that. We don't want to just make sure that they're all necessarily in the same project. We want to see what people are coming to this area and spending. So we don't want all of the same influences from every single one of the comps. We want a little bit of an outside view as well. And I think that we forget to do that sometimes. Condo or a PUD, again, is it new? Is the developer still selling? So we want to look at that from a Fannie Mae perspective. What is bracketing? So I promise you I didn't pay him money, okay, to kind of prompt these things, but I'm loving it right now. So what is it? Can we comp a 3-bedroom to a 3-bedroom? How about a 4-bedroom to a 3-bedroom? How about a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom? Does that usually kind of draw a line in the sand for people in the market looking? 2 is kind of unique. Okay, 3 and 4 not so much. We had a property that came in. The gross living area was about the same across the board. It was in the over 4,000s. What the current owners did, which this was a refinance, it was 4 bedrooms. They converted it to a 2-bedroom. Now, amazing. I mean, took lots of interior photos, gave us the new layout. I mean, there was a steam room and a walk-in closet and a this and a sitting room and it was basically his and her suites. Okay, without me telling your loved one, how many of you would really love that? Right? Okay? So you're like, secretly? Yeah, I'm not admitting that to anybody, but yeah, that'd be kind of cool. His and hers, yeah, I like that. Okay. So what does that do to the marketability of your property? I mean, how many people are going to be looking for a 2-bedroom, his and her, 4,000 square foot home? I mean, super unique. So the appraiser comped it with all 4 bedrooms, all same gross living area, and said cost to cure can be converted back to a 4. Not with the pictures and the sketch of the floor plan that you gave me. We're talking about plumbing changes, not just wall changes, not just some sheetrock and some studs going up. I mean, they definitely, like, literally recreated the space. You know what I mean? Chip and Joanna were there, and they redid it. So absolutely changed it. So is that even a realistic comment then? No, that's just crazy. So would you be comfortable refinancing that home for them when they had made these substantial changes? What if you have to take that house back? So think of it nothing other than if you had to take this property back because of a default on the loan note and you pounded a for sale sign in front of it, would there be just as many people in line to buy this house as there would be other 4-bedroom, 4,000 square foot homes? And what is your absolute answer going to be? No, absolutely not. Okay, so that does make a huge marketability difference. Do we have a lot of declining markets left in the United States right now, do you think? There's really not. I mean, we have not really seen that. I mean, sure, there might be a pocket here and there, but I mean, as a whole, as geographic, as statewide, really not so much on the declining side. And some of the areas that literally plummeted in that 07, 08, 09 have done a huge and amazing, you know, kind of appreciation, and Arizona being one of them. Arizona in one 12-month period gained in appreciation 100%, okay, before the crash and burn. Now, have they gotten all of that back in all areas of Arizona? No, I'm not saying that. But have they slowly come back, and did they do a great job of recovery there? They absolutely did. And then some places are like Michigan, where they're still in a recession for the most part. But again, a little bit of improvement, a little bit of appreciation, not so much a decline in value. So we're doing super great there. But if you do have a declining market, is there a kind of an issue with, this is a comp, it sold 6 months ago. That means it went under contract when? If it closed and sold 6 months ago. Maybe 7 months ago, 8 months ago. So if you're going to apply a time adjustment when we are in a declining market, it has to be applied for when it went off the market, not when it physically closed. So that's important. When you look at the pictures, ask yourself, do these look similar? Based on 1-story, 2-story, based on what were the building materials used, based on what is the curb appeal, based on what is the lot size and layout, and just your eyes can tell you a whole lot about something as well. Analyzing the comps, we threw a couple of different things in here, citydata.com, realtor.com, you can go out there. My chief appraiser said that if I put Zillow up there, that he would never, ever approve any of my training materials ever again, because Zestimate or whatever that is, you know, he just has to defend a lot of arguments from an appraiser perspective over Zillow. So again, what are you using if you are going to use any outside tools? Are you going to use something like History Pro? Are you going to use CU? CU is amazing. So analyzing the comparison, tell me what's actually happening here when I see a plus or a minus and a number. What are they doing? What does that mean? Correct. Absolutely. So if my subject property is 2,500 square feet and the comp is 3,000 square feet, is it going to be a plus or a minus? It's going to be a minus. I'm going to take away 500 square feet from comp 1 so that I'm looking at 2,500 and 2,500. But now the number that they use to apply for an adjustment for that 500 square feet, where do they get that number from? They make it up. Now, I mean, they don't like make it up like whoosh, make it up. I mean, they make it up based on their work file and what they're seeing as trends as value per square footage. And but do you see all that math? No, but should that math exist? Yes. So that's where they're doing it. So realtors, a lot of times we're like, where's a book that I can buy and how much is a garage? Is there a book? No, there's no book. Okay, there's no book because it depends where the garage is, how big is the garage, why, who built the garage, like what is the garage made out of. So there's so many different variables. So we used to have some guidelines of the unadjusted sale price of the comp, and then what did you actually turn it into? And if you turned it into Frankenstein, okay, and had to like literally mutilate the entire thing, well then obviously that was inappropriate. So what were the guidelines that we used to have in place, say, for any one adjustment on any one item, which was called a line adjustment? That was 10%. How about from where you started to where you ended, which we're going to weigh as net adjustment? What about that? That was 15. 15. And then forget about whether I plus to 4 or minus to 5. Forget that. You just add up the 5, the 6, the 4, and the 5. So if I had a plus 4 and a minus 5, and then a minus 1, and then the net result might be really negligible. It might be almost 0. But if I did a this and a 4 and a 1, didn't I make a lot of changes to it? So then we considered gross. And we said, I don't care which direction you went in, What are all the dollar amount changes you had to make to this property to make it look like that one? And that was called our gross. Correct, just absolute value. And what was that dollar amount as a percentage? Meaning, anybody? 25. So we had line of 10, net of 15, and gross of 25. And what does Fannie and Freddie say now? Nah. First of all, they're denying there was ever a 10. Okay, they're saying that was never them, that was more imposed by the industry. And they threw away the 15 and they threw away the 25. So it's still on our review sheet, our appraisal review checklist, because we still think it's a good best practice. But Fannie and Freddie took it away because they didn't want it to be a hard stop. Like, in other words, your appraiser changed it by 16%. Can't do this loan. I mean, I don't know that anybody did that, but they wanted to take that fear of not having that loan be saleable if they exceeded that 15 or that 25. But if you had to change a property value by making so many adjustments to it that it was over 1/4% of the entire value of the house, is that a lot? I think that's a lot. I mean, I think that's a lot. So again, good best practice, but you're not going to see anything in Fannie or Freddie's seller guide about a line, a net, or a gross anymore. So that's what we used to do. So what did it initially sell for? What did I have to do to it to make it look like my subject property? And where are we now? How many of you are sad that they took that away? How many of you are glad they took that away and that you give the appraiser a little bit more freedom? How many of you are just in general are surprised that it went away and you didn't know it? All right. So value basics, I now come up with my adjusted sale price. So I told you, hey, this house that sold for $115, it would have sold for $153 if it would have had a bigger lot and that pool and that and that. So I came up with it's really would have been worth if it had all the amenities that the subject in the location and the style and design is my house, it would have been $153. Okay. Next one, $157,800. The next one is $163,800. Does the appraiser then add these three up and then divide by 3 and we take an average? Yes or no, true or false? Is that what they do? True? Does that sound like there's some math? All right, they don't, okay? There is no math. So I'm not saying that to be flip. There's literally no math. All they've done now is created a range of value with the adjustments that were made to comparable homes. So what's that range? What's the lowest? And what's the highest? So where is my value going to come in at? Okay, so how many of you ever got the appraisal back, saw on a purchase that it appraised for exactly the purchase price and went, oh, realtor nailed that? Anybody? Okay. How many of you went, whoa, they backed into it? How many of you thought that? Okay, wow, I sent them $199.9 and they brought it in at $199.9. Okay? So again, do they have a little bit of a blinder? They do. But it would be ridiculous for me to pick 148 because that doesn't make sense. It would be ridiculous for me to pick 167 because that doesn't make any sense. So they're going to pick a number within this range that they've established. The next paragraph is going to say which one of these comps did they put the most weight on that they had to adjust the least to be able to pick that value. And it should make sense based on how many raw adjustments did they make? What was the overall net adjustment that they made? Does that really look like they should have used that one to put the most weight against it? So you read it, see if it makes sense. So how many of you are disappointed that there's really not some at least algebra in here? Like the highest to the power of over the rental 368 days of the, yeah, none. You got none of that. They pick a range, they pick a number. Look, it's the sale price. All right, so I'm not saying like, oh, that's bad, or it just is what it is. So that's what happens. So this is your next paragraph. The weighted average, it's not a numeric average. It's just which one did I put the most weight on. When we look at the fields, not every field, it's important to know, is going to be a value field. It might be a location. How far away is it? What's the style of it? What's the condition of it? What's the quality of it? So we want to look at all those things. So it's important to note that you want to go distance and what direction as well. So we want to know, did they go north or south or east or west? Not that there's a specific distance location kind of rule in place, but just where did they have to go for it? So check the address, check how close it is, what did it sell for as the unadjusted sale price. Gross living area obviously is huge, and what's happening there. And then where did they get their data from? It has to be a public source. You don't want to see private sale, private sale, private sale. How do I validate that then? So we do want to know their source. We want to know the days on the market. Again, hope it's consistent with everything on it. Across the board adjustment. So I have a $10,000 value for the pool that wasn't on comp 1. So it's a plus 10. Comp 2 is a plus 10. Comp 3 is a plus 10. What are they telling me pools are worth? So comp 1 and 2 and 3 all would have sold for $10,000 more if they would have had a pool, correct? Is that what the story I'm telling? If it says plus 10, plus 10, plus 10? Yes, that's what story they're telling you. What is my problem with that story if I'm the reviewer? They're all the same value, but what are you telling me about how many homes around here have pools? None of the 3 have one. So I added one to all 3. So is there something flawed with your story? If everybody wants a pool and they're willing to pay $10,000 extra for a house that has one, what would there be more of? Pools, okay, pools. So give me a comp with a pool. So we call it again, I said it before, a paired sale. Show me that in your work file that I'm not seeing, you have distinct, comps that you didn't use, but you have evidence in here that when a house has a pool, it usually goes for about $10,000 more than a house without a pool.
Or couldn't you say that, pools are rare around here, so if you want a pool, you're actually probably going to pay a little bit more because
They
there's
could.
not one of them.
They could, but how did you get the $10,000 number? That's all.
I mean, could they say that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then you're going to be like, well, at least that's why they address that there isn't one, and then maybe why. Because if everybody wants them and they come at such a premium, is it because of how hard the dirt is, literally? Like the excavation process is so expensive. It could be that it's a development and there's no way to access the backyard. You know what I mean? But so just tell me more of the story, that's all. But absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Does that make sense? So really, appraisal review is common sense. What story did they tell me on the checklist, literally, the front page? And then are they telling me the same story when they're giving me these kind of things in here? So sales and financing concessions, this has sort of been clarified a little bit. If your comp 1 sold for $150,000, but they gave $5,000 to the buyer, what would they have taken for the property? $145,000. So Fannie and Freddie aren't saying that there has to be a dollar for dollar adjustment if the comp includes a financing concession or a sales concession, but that's what the Appraisal Institute is saying. So they're not saying it, but there should be some addressing of whether the comps have these concessions or not in it. So it is important that we look at that. What is the market's reaction? Is it truly financing or was it sales? Did they leave a boat? Or did they give them $5,000 for closing costs? So should they have been able to detect that and get that information from the comps? Yes. That's also what has been said. So yes, they do. When did it sell? Again, giving your timing. Location. Were they in a neutral location or were they in an adverse area? Was it beneficial where they were as far as the location? Were there any factors going on that led to that? What's going on? What about the site? Is it similar? Is it the same living experience? And how big is it? The view, we already mentioned, most expensive view is water. So could you see view, water, water, water? So we know all the comps also see water, but then there still be a dollar adjustment. What do you think? Absolutely. What do you see of the water? Is your view like this? Is your view like this? You know what I mean? So absolutely, there could be skewed views and ones that are absolutely more expensive. Do you get to see the $10,000 view? If they're giving it a $10,000 adjustment, they better have taken a picture of it. And you're like, yeah, that would be nice. Would I pay $10,000 to look out my window and see that? Probably. Or no. You know what I mean? So it does give you at least that perspective of what they are seeing and that description. Do you guys have any weird names of your styles or designs out here of houses? Like Florida has their own total vocabulary of what they call houses. Meaning like that's a garden style, that's a Floridian, and it's like we could just call them a ranch, okay? But they like to have them like sound more fancy. But when I go to California, they call a ranch house, a single floor living, a rancher. They put an ER after it. And I'm like, I thought a rancher was a dude with a hat. You know what I mean? Like, so I never called it a rancher before. In Connecticut, there are these new construction homes. They are called bilonials. Super weird. It has like the little skinny windows where there's kind of half above grade living, but it's really a basement. You can't call it anything more than a basement. And then a colonial built on top of it. So it's new. They're building them new, and they're called bilonials. So I know that, I don't know here, but I know in Oklahoma, they have barn dominiums. Do you guys have those here? See, so you do have something. Turned into and converted? Okay. So it really should be very what you call it in your area, because that appraiser is supposed to be what? Local, okay? He's supposed to know what's going on. They're supposed to know. So what's going on? What is the style? What is it? And again, then you should be able to decide, is that a comparable or not? Custom design, unique, higher quality, meets or exceeds expectations, economy construction, basic. So unique, architecturally significant is not something we typically see needing mortgage insurance. You know what I mean? That's going to be your kind of, you know, it was designed by this and it was that and it was added on and flown in and brought up. So what are you typically seeing as far as quality grades? Okay.
Or it could be an earth home and those would be more higher.
Okay. All right. So again, kind of pay attention to that. What are we going to try to stay away from, or what might be an issue selling to Fannie or Freddie? Yeah, unique, absolutely. Now, they don't say that in their seller guide. They say that it's up to the lender to prove the marketability and the value, but they like unique homes as long as you give them everything they need to justify that they should have liked that unique home. So that falls back on, how do I get a comp for a unique home? Yeah, it kind of is a full circle going back and forth. You can only be a C1 once. You can have a lot of work done, but you're still a 2, okay? You can only be 1 once. So when we look at condition, you know, what's going on? No deferred maintenance whatsoever. It's been very well maintained. A minor deferred maintenance, you know, it's a little bit older, in need of significant repairs or substantial damage. What are we going to stay away from saleability to the secondary market? Okay, some 5s and 6s, okay, probably. Now, if I make it subject to, because I saw significant repairs that were required and I believe them to be, you know, really about safety, about, you know, just overall living. So am I then still going to call it a C5 if I've made it subject to as your appraiser? No. I'm going to make it subject to, and then what it will be when those repairs are completed. So I shouldn't be giving it a C5 if I've made it subject to. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, yes, but that shouldn't be a 5 over paint. Well, unless there's a bubble, no. Bedrooms, bathrooms, we talked about the importance of from a marketability and how that is. So I think that that's pretty. Now, if I have a basement and I have 2 bedrooms down there, and then I have above grade 3 bedrooms, how many bedrooms do I have? 3. I have 3 bedrooms. And what does everybody want to say they have? 5. So Fannie Mae's definition of below grade is any part of the foundation that touches dirt, anything below that is basement. Okay? Now, does that mean that basement can't give value? Absolutely not. Basements can give a substantial amount of value. They just can't go towards gross living area or bedroom count. But I can certainly give them finished basement value. So again, people never like that, especially on your refinances. They're going to argue with you about that and all of that. So what makes it a bedroom upstairs? It's typically that it can be closed off, meaning for privacy, and that there is, say it loud, a closet. Okay, that there is a closet in it. So that's kind of what they're saying makes a bedroom. Now, if I walk into a bedroom and then have to go through that bedroom to get into the next bedroom, is that 2 bedrooms or is that 1 bedroom? That's 1. And if I have to go through, say, I have a little walk-up and then I have finished area on the 2nd floor or maybe even on a 3rd floor. But if I walk through any unfinished area, even if it's like the little just kind of circular stairway or a little kind of back stairway, then anything beyond that is also considered unfinished and not usable. So they need to finish that area so that I can count the continuing area. Does that make sense?
What about like attic conversions? Because we don't really have basements here, but we have a lot of people that will finish up their attic. How do they, what makes it be considered finished out or not?
It depends on the accessibility of it and is it zoned for that? Like, can they have living space and area on that higher level? It might be a matter of like egress. Are the windows big enough in the attic? Meaning, did they change out the windows for egress as well to come to code? So it's a lot about code. Okay, it's a lot about the zoning and whether they did it properly or not. So that's really what it's about. So square footage, bathrooms, bedrooms, the biggest piece of it. We just talked about the basements. And again, what does that mean? I have people that will throw down a nasty old piece of carpeting and put a treadmill down there and be like, I finished my basement. No, you didn't. You threw a dirty rug down there and a treadmill that you're never going to use down there, okay? So these high-end finished basements are pretty amazing. Now, do people spend a lot of money if they were to, especially here, dig out, excavate, do all that? I mean, it could cost them $100,000 to do that. Are they going to get $100,000 in value back? Probably not, okay? Probably not. So they want all of their money back and acknowledged in value, and it just doesn't work that way. Sorry. The house does need to be year-round residable. So you don't probably have it here, but I live in the Northeast now. So up in the New England area, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, they'll have what's called camps. That's what they call cottages there. They call them camps. I'm like, the only camp I heard of is like Girl Scout camp, Boy Scout camp, but they call them camps. They're not year-round residable. They only go there in the summer. So they don't have a direct heating source for winter. It's not even really accessible by most roads during the winter to get to these remote kind of, those are not mortgageable. It does need to be year-round residable, meaning it has to be heated, okay? Has to have public utilities or utilities that are common for that particular area. So septic or sewer, well, whatever it is. So just making sure it's all functioning. Transfer of sale, 3 years on the subject. We talked about that before. 12 months on all of them. And we would look for things like, why does it keep churning? Why is this turned over? What was done to it? It could have been a foreclosure auction sale that they then renovated and then flipped it. And that would give you an explanation as to why it changed value so much in such a short time. So that we would be looking for them to give us a little bit of an explanation on that. And again, just where did you get it? All of that again, does it go back and does it make sense to you, the selection that they made and the weight they put on that? Is it as is or subject to? If it's subject to, you need to make sure that they do it and it's completed.
So that 3-month thing that you were talking about, is that like a rule?
Yes, for how long they've searched the comps, yes. So subject should go back for that longer period of time and then the comp should be that year. Yep. And again, part of that is because of that churning. okay, to see what activity actually happened on this particular home. Absolutely. What's the value? Read all of the sections. How many of you skip the narrative? Don't raise your hand. I was reading an appraisal, and it was really scary because it said the inspection was performed around dusk. It was a fragrant scent in the air, and I'm like, what? I was literally waiting for it to be, and then the stranger stepped from behind the tree and approached the woman. Like, I really thought it was like getting all weird on me, and I'm like, where is this going? So as I'm reading, he mentions that the fragrance in the air that he was, the scent that he was picking up on at dusk was apple orchard. It was trees, it was the blossoms. And there was how many of them? 225 of them. Trees. So what is that? It's an orchard, it's a farm, okay? So did he anywhere else on any check mark say that it was an orchard or that it was this or it was be using that? No. But did he tell you in some weird paragraph that it was really an orchard? So if you missed that, are you going to blame him? You better not. He's going to be like, I wrote you a paragraph. It smelled lovely. You know what I mean? And you're going to be like, that's weird. Why'd you say it that way? Why didn't you just tell me up front? Another one that we had where they gave bonus photos. Do you guys like bonus photos?
Yes.
This one it was in upstate New York. It was kind of rural, but I mean, there was enough housing and density around there that you could definitely find comps, and he did. And they weren't that far away. There was no real major adjustments going on as far as line adjustments. The net and the gross were totally within. They were recent, but there was some outbuildings. Now, are outbuildings pretty common in rural areas on bigger parcels of property? Yeah, they are. And there was no real contributory value given to these outbuildings. But the appraiser, as bonus, opened up all of these outbuildings. There was 2 of them. And took pictures of the contents. And the contents of these 2 outbuildings were tires, like rubber tires from like vehicles and trucks and things. And then just put them in the file. Didn't say a word about them, just put them in the file. So what is the underwriter thinking? Like, what are all these tires from? Like, what's going on there? So goes on Google Earth, zooms in on the property, and lo and behold, she sees these lines tied to the trees with the little flags with a big sign that says used car lot that's being literally operated on the property. So now she goes back to the photos in the appraisal and sees the angles that they were taken at. They completely left out that section and those cars. So she's like, are you kidding me? So they sent a review by and said, Google Earth, could it be old? Yeah. Could it be not being used as a used car lot at the time that the appraiser went out there? Yeah, that's a good one. So did drive by, absolutely a used car lot. Absolutely a used car lot. So my question to you is, you completely omitted the fact that that was being used as something other than just strictly residential. It wasn't on an adjoining lot, it was on the lot, okay, that you appraised. Why'd you throw in the photos? I mean, was that ethical conversation we had this morning? Like, put them in, take it, don't take it, no. You know what I mean? And like, you just couldn't help yourself and they just went in the file. So now, because of appraisal independence rule, the lender now that knows that there was a material omission from this appraisal, by law, has to do what? By law. What do you think? I got an appraisal from a licensed appraiser that omitted fact. They do. They have to legally, they have to report them. So is there going to be any justification that in your mind that you could think of when he goes maybe in front of a board, the state board or something? I don't know what happens. Why did you not tell the lender, that this was being used currently as, I cannot think of it, and I've been thinking about it.
Well, I did, I showed the tires.
Right.
And I just forgot to write things.
Right, like was there an addendum that was missed? But look, I told you what was going on, but why didn't you take a picture of the cars or the flags?
Oh, that one just didn't turn in.
You know what I mean? So to me, like, why? Like, why did you do that? I mean, it took 2 years of your life with a college degree to get to be a licensed appraiser, and you just blew it. You just potentially blew that, okay? So I just don't understand why, because know what? It was a refi, and they used an AMC. So can we blame a loan officer on this one? The loan officer probably called ahead. No, I didn't know what appraiser it was. It's an AMC. I don't pick the appraiser. We don't go by a rotation. It's whoever takes the assignment. Did the appraiser knock on the door of the homeowner and get offered a good deal on a car? You know what I mean? Like, I don't, like, because we can't blame the realtor, right? I mean, there was no realtor. It's a refi. So I just don't understand why. Like, why did you include that in the comments but not in the main section? Why did you tell me about the scent of the apple orchard? You know what I mean? Why did you? I just don't get it. So read everything. I've been trying to talk about the common red flags, not using the closest or most appropriate. You not even driving by the comp pictures to see if that was really an updated multiple listing picture or was it from the 60s. You know, just going in and having those blinders on and picking something that you know you can back into that number with. So there's still, just like you can imagine in any position or any job of any kind, there's still bad behavior that goes on. So lack of bracketing when you don't have just right, boilerplate, best comps, close to highways, all that stuff. Very silly. That's it. My website, how you would get our guidelines or access to our regional underwriters if you did have a question on a property that was specifically geographic. All of my training, other opportunities. I mentioned it before, the Action Center open from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. And of course, my legal disclaimer for anything I said or did to you in the second half of the day. So thank you very much. Anything else? All right, just one thing. When you are uploading these appraisals and they're going through uniform appraisal data set and you're getting your pass or your fail and you're making sure it goes through, Fannie and Freddie are sucking in all of that data and putting it in collateral advisor, putting it in collateral underwriter. So they are using all of that data to basically create an AVM of their own, which is their tool. So if you do want to go in, if you get a 4.5, a 5, why? So what's really cool is when you go into the full report of collateral underwriter, they will rank your comps as what they think they are. So if they have 15 other comps and your comp 1 is their 19 and your comp 2 is their 22, and you need to look at that and say why. So can you call up or have any communication with an appraiser that says, I think there's other comps out there that you should have used? No, you can't use the comp word. You can say there are other closed sales that I have as data. Can you tell me why these were not selected and put into your consideration for your opinion of value? And so it's just a way of rewording it. It's a way of looking and saying like, wow, look at the map. So through CU, you can get that Google Earth experience where you can literally go look at all your comps. From a look down, you can see what style they are, what they are. You can look at and pull back on the map and see where are they clustered. Are they all north? Are they all south? You can see the square footage and what does your legal documents and closing documents say about that being accurate or inaccurate. So there are so many tools there that you might be missing that you really want to investigate when you don't have that confidence level and you do have that, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5. You know what I mean? You definitely want to use those tools at that point.
I think I missed it earlier, Trent. Can you elaborate a little on the cost approach?
The cost approach is not required by Fannie or Freddie unless it's a manufactured home, new construction, very specific manufactured homes have to include it. But when it is included, you have to look at it. So it no longer do we have like a rule that says the value cannot exceed 30% of the total value. Like that used to be an old rule that's been gone for years and years. So you're really just looking at it from more of a lot size. I think it's helpful. So if they say that the entire site, which is 6 acres, is worth 20, and then you have a comp that's on 10 acres, and they give that differential of sites, just the proximity and how much different it is as far as square footage and they say, all right, this one is 6, that one's 10, so there's a 4-acre difference. So I'm giving comp 1 an adjustment of $30,000. Does that make any sense? You told me that 6 acres was only worth 20, and now you're telling me the difference of 4 acres is worth this much? That doesn't make any sense. So use it as a tool, but it's not required. If it is there, you have to at least give it a look, just see if there's anything freakish about it. The only time I've ever seen it happen is in 2 times I saw it in Connecticut. And that was the way that the value is now with the residents on it, with the home. And then if I saw it as just raw land, it's actually more valuable without this house being on it. Wouldn't that be embarrassing if that was yours? Like if you knock your house down, you'd be way better off.
That's happening in some areas.
Yeah.
Because they want to knock them down, if they don't have to knock it down first, then
It just gives you a little bit of an insight, because the last thing you want them to do is knock down the house that you just financed. You know what I mean? So you do want to be like, okay, what am I doing here? So it's something notable, and then follow whatever your company guideline would be to, do you need to take any other action? Do you have to ask any questions, anything like that?
Back to the bedroom thing, is there a specific guideline in Fannie and Freddie that states that what is the bedroom? I mean, besides the closet and it has to be closed off. And the reason I ask is I have an agent that actually came to me this week, and she had an appraisal done last year. She, in her house, she has a bedroom that apparently was a media room. There are no windows in this bedroom. It's all
Okay.
done great. It has an ensuite, it has a closet, it has everything, but there are no windows. And so that appraiser a year ago calls the bedroom. But she's just gonna list her house. And she's like, but I'm scared it's my bedroom. And we confirmed with a couple of our appraisers that no, it has to have an exterior egress to be called a bedroom.
Right, and
That
that's,
appraiser called it one and it doesn't. So she's not sure how to list it. Like, I don't know what to.
the only thing I would say, just to solve it so you're not blaming one person or another, is look, I don't think you're going to have that specific guidance from Fannie or Freddie, so it would be USPAP. So if one of your appraisers can actually look it up that says a bedroom has to be calculated as this and give her that tangible, I think that would be the best bet for you, especially since she's a realtor, too. So I would say USPAP. Yep. Yep. Anything else?
what page was it on that we have to, just as a tool to show
Sure.
the people if the appraisal doesn't come in? What page is it on that says that the appraiser is local and familiar with the area?
That is the certifications, the 25 certifications. It's number 11 and 12. Yep, number 11 and 12. Anything else? No?
Well, thank you guys for your time and your participation and being here. I just want to say that as a strategic partner with Cendera Funding, I'm always grateful to be able to bring opportunities to you guys like today that helps you guys to expand your knowledge and ultimately helps you be more successful in your careers. Because I do believe that our relationship goes much deeper than mortgage insurance, right? So if this was helpful for you today and you value some of the things that we bring to you guys as a partner, I just ask you to please think of us whenever you have a conventional loan that needs MI and that you select Genworth. And we are available in your income tax system. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, I'm always available to you. Reach out to me. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a card? Yeah. I'm going to reach out to our chief